All right, well, welcome to A Deeper Dig, the Small Farms Winter Webinar Series. These bonus episodes are meant to continue each week's webinar topic in conversation with members of the local foods and small farms team, commercial ag educators, and that week's presenter. In this informal chat, we'll talk about this week's topic, answer some of those lingering questions we didn't get around to in the chat box, and hear more from our speaker. I'm Grant McCarty. I'm a local foods and small farms educator for Joe Davis, Stevenson, and Winnebago counties. I'm joined by Bronwyn Ailey, local foods and small farms educator for Gallatin, Hamilton, Hardin, Pope, Saline, and White counties. Hi, Bronwyn. How are you today?
I'm good.
Good weather?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Had to wear a jacket today. Southern Illinois, we put the shorts away from 2 days ago and put on the jacket and the toboggan. So
oh, geez. Well, I can't.
Ready for snow next the end of the week. So.
Same here. Someone's coming in for us. We're also joined by Katie Bell. Katie Bell is a local foods and small farms educator for Franklin, Jackson, Perry, Randolph, and Williamson counties. Hi, Katie.
Hey, Grant.
Similar weather down there for you?
Yeah, it's very erratic is a good word to describe it. I left my house yesterday with the windows open, and then I got home and had to turn on the heat and close all the windows.
And now we're joined by Nathan Johanning, commercial agriculture educator from Madison, Monroe, and St. Clair counties. How's it going, Nathan?
Oh, just fine, Grant. How are you?
Oh, it's not too bad. Not too bad.
Yeah, same complaints about the weather, so nothing much different from me.
yeah. It's weather talk is how we start these.
Yeah, yesterday was a cold reality and awakening to the fact that it is definitely March still.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
From the 60 plus that we had over the weekend, but it works.
It works. And finally, we are joined by Doug Gucker, a local foods and small farms educator for DeWitt, Macon, and Piatt counties, and the presenter of the Pawpaw webinars. Welcome, Doug, for joining us. How are you doing?
Oh, just spectacular.
Well, I tell you, your topic of Pawpaws was the one that people were really interested in this series. When we looked at folks registering and when we looked at live participants, folks were clamoring to get in. So what is it about your Pawpaws?
Well, I think the thing about Pawpaws is that most people have heard about them, particularly if they live in the eastern half of the United States, where wild pawpaws are found. It's not uncommon, particularly in rural areas, to hear people talk about eating a pawpaw or knowing someone that eats pawpaws or goes out and picks pawpaws in the wild, kind of like our mushroomers. So they have quite a following. So yeah, it's over time in the past, 100 years ago, actually, they thought pawpaw was going to be the new fruit that was going to be the as popular or more popular than apples.
Huh.
Wow, did that not happen?
I mean, I don't know about others. I have had a pawpaw. I was telling Brahma before we started, my grandparents had 2 pawpaw trees, and yet again in Appalachia. So this was I think they got it from Stark Brothers in 1985. They planted these 2 trees. So I grew up with pawpaws in a small amount. But I'm not too much of an enthusiast. So just based on its flavor is what I found.
Well, and that is part of the issue is that the flavor of the pawpaw can vary dramatically between varieties, and most of our older varieties are selections from native varieties that were found to be flavorful, have good properties that the locals then in that particular area would then keep the seeds and then try to continue to propagate those, because they didn't have to go out and once again find the ones that taste the good as compared to the ones that are not so good. And so yeah, that's not unusual. That's not unusual, and that's why we now have the grafted varieties, and there has been a concerted effort by a couple groups here in the United States to make a determined effort to come up with a better flavor profile and get that better flavor profile and composition incorporated into our better varieties that we have. And we're getting there. It's a slow process as it's a niche fruit. And
Has
it is a
anyone
niche
else?
fruit.
Yeah, I mean, I know Doug and I, of course, have tasted Pawpaws. Has anyone else tasted Pawpaws?
I think I have, but it's been a long time ago. I know I have visited a Pawpaw germplasm collection that's down in Kentucky, but
Yeah.
that wasn't. I saw that with Steve Ayers. We did a market ready training that was in Kentucky way back in the early part of my extension career, and we went down and saw that as a part of the farms down there. But there weren't any ripe. I feel like I have had one at some point, but I couldn't put my finger on it specifically.
Yeah. So yeah, you have to be careful because the Pawpaw has a lot of compounds in it that help protect it from wildlife browsing on it, like deer. And so deer do not find the pawpaw tree particularly tasty, and so they won't really browse on it like they will other understory trees in the forest where they're typically found. And some of that flavor and the skin of a pawpaw is horrible tasting. You really don't want to get any part of it into when you're taking it out of its skin, you're processing it or eating it fresh. You don't want to get the skin because the skin's very bitter, and that's part of its defenses against insects and other things, how the fruit that maintains so well out in the wild without really just being, the Japanese beetles truly don't really bother pawpaw trees unless they have just about devastated everything else that's out there.
Huh.
So, and Doug, I have never tried out Pawpaw before. When I watched your webinar, was actually learning quite a bit because I think like I was one of the other 160 some odd that were on your webinar live, wanting to learn more about production and such. And so as we talk about, you were talking about whether we eat that fresh or as a value added. What's your thought on, for how we would utilize Pawpaw? Is it better to use as a value added product, or, is there a market for fresh eating, or, a direct market from the fresh produce itself?
There is a market for fresh, particularly with some of our higher end restaurants and chefs, because they know it's seasonal. A lot of them appreciate the delicate tropical flavor that it has. And so they will put it in like creme brulees or some of these things where that delicate flavor really can shine, and it isn't outcompeted. I mean, cinnamon just literally overwhelms it. You put a little bit of spice in there, and it gets overwhelmed pretty quickly. Kentucky, they've been successful in Pawpaw ice cream, but once again, there's no commercial processing of pawpaws. And so to get a major ice cream manufacturer to even put it out as a specialty flavor of the month kind of thing is very difficult because the processing takes quite a bit of time. We have machines that could do the processing. It's just that there isn't enough volume to warrant anyone investing in the processing yet.
And remind me again, Doug, what is roughly the harvest window time frame for these?
The harvest window is actually quite long. I mean, I would say it's similar to a lot of our other fruit trees, depending upon the variety. It starts around here in central Illinois. It starts around the 1st of September and it extends through the entire month of September. We have some earlier varieties that can sometimes be, it depends on the year. I've had some varieties that were ripe, caught me by surprise in late August, the last week or two of August. But more typically for me, it's the beginning of September. I go out and I begin to check my trees and see, and I have, and mine are all medium to late. But they have quite a few different varieties now. But there's a harvest window of at least a month. And even on a single tree, they don't all just become ripe, boom, just like that. It'll extend over a 2-week period on a tree. I mean, there'll be a major harvest, but then after that, there'll still be others to pick up along the way. And that's where the value added comes in. You can only sell so many fresh pawpaws, and they can be stored. They hold in refrigeration 2 weeks easily. Can be up to 3 weeks. Of course, they can't drop on the ground. These are ones that are picked off the tree, and picking off the tree, it's almost an art form. But I think it's that way with mini fruit, that you know the proper time to pick it. I mean, I can imagine, I don't know about peaches, but I know when I get a nice ripe peach that was picked only a day before or something, it's obvious that they know exactly the timing to pick that peach. And that would be the same thing with pawpaw. Is I have a way to go out and pick it. And for me, I just look and I raise the cluster up slightly with my hand. And if one of the fruit releases, it's like, okay, it is ripe, because if I let it sit another day, they're all going to be on the ground. And so, which is what you don't want, because they bruise so easily. And so I just basically go out and that way I can select the big fruit. Yeah, the little stuff, who cares? But the big fruit, I can check on that. And so that's how I do it. That's the way I found out to do it. You can use one of those apple picking baskets for higher fruit, but quite honestly, none of my trees are over 15 feet tall, and the fruit typically is down within 9 feet where I can reach.
What is the yield for a typical tree that, like, with
Well,
trees, how much are you getting?
Depending how well you manage it.
Okay.
The Kentucky State has some figures on that, and they typically figure somewhere between 20 to 50 pounds. So there's quite a range. And some of our newer varieties, like Susquehanna and the other S. There's a couple of them they're quite productive, and so those are the ones that really come in with nice big fruit. The seeds are smaller. That come in around 3/4 of an inch to 5/8 of an inch, much smaller than our typical older pawpaw, where they were about 1.25 inches long. I mean, these are seeds. You don't miss one of these when you're scooping them out. These are seeds, and so they're hoping to get them down to a size that would be more comparable to like a large watermelon seed. I mean, the seeds we have now are like huge kidney beans kind of seeds.
So that's kind of where the direction they're going with the breeding. They're aiming for trying to get smaller seeds and flavor. Is there other categories they're looking at too?
Actually, no, it's really the flavor and the smaller seeds, because what they're hoping to do is get the yield higher, so that then for when we come to the value added, there's a better ratio of return, because right now, in some cases, they're over 10% of the, there, 9/10 of it is pulp and 10% is seed. And so that's a pretty high ratio. And that's if there's a really good job extracting the pulp. If we use some of our go-to methods using a food processor with a spiral strainer on it, and that we're getting pulp bypass of almost 50% on that, which is, just not acceptable unless you're going to charge a very high price per pound for that product. And so that's really the rub, is we need the specialized longer length screens that you'd see in a commercial processing type of operation.
So we're talking about, commercial processing and things like that. What direction do you see the pawpaw market headed in? I mean, will it ever get to being like a specialty ice cream flavor, or is it going to be, always smaller scale?
Now's your
Right.
chance, Doug, to make that prognosis that someone can come back in 100 years and tell you whether you're right or wrong.
Yeah, I know. That's why I took a deep breath. And that is truly the issue. And poor Kentucky State University, they have been working on this since the mid 1990s. And as Nathan pointed out, he was down at their germplasm. I mean, they are the national repository for pawpaw germplasm. And so, which is all great, but part of the problem is that even with 20 years of work, and they still have not been able to really get much of a buy-in from processors on any processor of any to do any commercial processing of these pawpaws. And once again, this is why the breeding, I think if we get the breeding down to where we have smaller seeds, higher pulp ratio, pulp to seed ratio, things are going to come along. Also, we work on that flavor so that we have a consistent flavor, so that everyone says, oh yeah, pawpaw, it tastes like blah, 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 blah. It has this flavor that everyone knows, kind of like if you eat a mango or a papaya, you go, oh yes, I know that flavor, and they all relatively taste the same. And with pawpaw, we still have this wide range because we still have a lot of the wild pawpaw in all of our varieties. And that's not bad. I mean, that is what helps make this pawpaw something that is so great for organic production, because there's only a few things that really bother it. And the worst being is the fungal complex that attacks it, which is only cosmetic for the most part, unless we have early onset. And so really, it's a great candidate for organic. That being said, we just need to, with our newer varieties, we're getting a better consistency in our flavor. They now test them all so that they don't let anything out that a panelist doesn't think would be acceptable in the market. And so, I mean, we're working on it. We working on it. They're working on it, and progress is being made. But right now, the seedlings, I mean, it's a young industry. When you go buy quantities of grafted pawpaws, I mean, if you're lucky, you can get them for $20 each. In quantity. I mean, so it's no small undertaking. It's no small undertaking with a market that is not that big. They're having success in the big city areas, but once again, that's with local growers going to that restaurant market there where it's a niche, and it's that seasonality. They're bringing the seasonality in. They have something just really different that the customer has never had before. And so that's working out well. you can sell for the fresh market works for those people that love pawpaws. I mean, it's like other things. Some people love them. Some people, who cares? And for the people that love them, they will seek them out and buy them. I was one of those people that back in the mid 2000s started reading about Kentucky State's work with Pawpaw and how this was going to be up and coming, and and going to be the next big thing. And I was had just retired from farming, and I thought, okay, I'll give this a shot. So not doing anything in a little way, I ordered 18 trees, and so 15 of them survived, and that was through the drought of 2020. I mean, once you get these established, they're hardy. They could take it. They can really take it, and they produce fruit. They'll produce fruit in a drought. They're a native tree. They're used to our mid-continent climate. Global warming hasn't hurt them a bit here in central Illinois because it's just moderated the temperatures a little more than it has in the past. So they work out well. It's just the fact that, like so many things, like people that grow organic grains that couldn't find a miller, it's kind of the same thing here. It may even take a cooperative of pawpaw producers to come together and start a processing plant in an area. And I know there's been talk, the Ohio Pawpaw Producers Group, they're quite active down in southern Ohio, right along the river down in their Ozark area, And so there may be something that'll come out of that as well into northern Kentucky, because they're quite active. They have pawpaw festivals down there. Ohio, I have to get this right. Ohio University down there in Athens, Ohio. That area, they have a fall pawpaw festival every year, and they do it upright. I think you can have a pawpaw in anything you want down there. And so yeah, they're still an active group pursuing this, but I think it's going to be like so many other things. It's probably going to have to be a producers group or a cooperative that decides that they're going to bite the bullet, and they're going to pool their money, and they're going to start a small processing plant somewhere. But the pulp works well. We use it in the wintertime. It works out really well. You can substitute anything that calls for a banana, and like banana bread, it's it's a very mild flavor type of profile. Same thing, you can use pawpaw in pawpaw ice cream, though. It's the best. It is really good. When I do pawpaw, my wife says, ice cream? And so, yeah, that's the biggest hit by far, is pawpaw ice cream. And Kentucky State kind of said the same thing. Pawpaw, among their tasting panel, it was pawpaw ice cream was one of the top favorites.
When you mentioned earlier with Kentucky State's work on the varieties, and you said when Grant had asked about the yield per tree, and you said there was a pretty wide range on that, and and I think that I'm assuming that, like with other fruits, variety plays a big role in the yield. But what about pruning? Because I remember, I think I'm remembering this correctly from your webinar. You talked to, I think you said this, that we didn't do a lot of pruning. Was that correct?
Right.
And can you maybe touch on that again, Doug? Refresh my memory on what you said about, I'm so used to, we think about apple trees and peach trees when we're doing a lot of pruning. What kind of, what is the pruning techniques, or what do you use for your pawpaws?
Well, kind of like, to a certain regard, the biggest thing with pawpaw pruning is the fact that the lower branches, just kind of like an apple tree in a home kind of orchard type of thing, is, you want your lower branch to be up, 3 feet off the ground type of thing, just so we get airflow and we keep the fruit from touching the ground, that type of thing. But Kentucky State, in their evaluation, where they pruned a row of pawpaws and then didn't prune a row of pawpaws, what they found was 4 years later, there was a significant difference in the size and productivity of those trees. The prune pawpaws were just not as productive. And so their recommendation is only limited pruning, such as the lower branches, but as far as trying to open the canopy up and do that type of pruning, they don't recommend it.
And how much new growth each season do you see a pawpaw putting on? And again, I'm when I visualize it, I have to go back to, I keep thinking about an apple tree where, we have a lot of, we may have water sprouts or, a lot of new growth each year that as we try to keep that canopy open, we're pruning out. I'm just curious, how much new growth do you see on pawpaws each year?
They actually are a pretty slow growing tree. I mean, they're medium to slow, and they don't have water sprouts on the branch. They do have a lot of root sprouts, much like a persimmon. And so that's another reason to kind of trim up those lower branches so that you can get under there twice a year. I come in and I just mow under there to keep those sprouts down. Otherwise, you'll have your own pawpaw thicket, which is not what you want. You don't want a pawpaw thicket out there, and you can quickly get a pawpaw thicket out there. One year I didn't do that, and boy, was I amazed what it looked like the following spring. so no, that is where the sprouts come in. Is they have very vigorous root suckers, and so that's what you need to keep down, just so you just don't get this propagation of all of a sudden 10 feet away, whoop, I got a pawpaw coming up. Oh crap! And so you just do that. So really that part's easy. I mean, for anyone who owns a lawnmower, you can take care of it. It's not a big deal. It just takes a periodic doing. And if you do it in the spring and then again towards late summer, you handle it just fine. You don't have anything huge out there you're dealing with. But let them go a year and you'll have something that's bigger than your index finger.
And I assume with all that, of course, you want to manage your stand, but certainly if you had grafted trees, who knows the quality of fruit you may get off of those suckers. If it was a seedling tree, it'd be a little bit different. You could maybe even capitalize on that a little bit. But for these grafted trees, of course, what you're going to get from those root suckers isn't at all probably what's going to be like what you have up on top, besides of course just managing your stand and keeping things open. But
excellent point, Nathan. You're going,
you just thought those varieties tasted good, and then
that's right,
get some strays producing fruit in there and you don't know which is which, and then
we're grafting it to root stock that has great root hardiness and survivability, and we really don't care what that fruit tastes like. So yes, that's the other important thing too, and you don't want that cross-pollination started out there either, because all of a sudden you're going to be having, well, this tree used to taste so good, cross-pollination. I typically don't speaking of cross-pollination, flies do it. That's that may be the unappetizing part of what people think, it's not some native bee or something like that. No, it's a fly. When flies are native pollinators, but it's not your typical hoverfly that is doing it either. It's something that's more attracted to something that's rotting, kind of a smell. It's a beautiful flower, but this, you don't want a bouquet in the house, kind of a thing.
Well, I wonder too, I mean, like, sometimes what we encounter with some of our peach growers and apple growers, if it's like a very wet spring and it's flowering, sometimes there's a decline in yield that season. Do we see anything with weather impacting the pollination of pawpaws in the spring and their flowers?
A late frost, 20, what was it, 2019, I think we had well, in 2012 particularly, we've had a couple of years. 2012 was a bad year, and 2019 we had we had a warm spring, warm March, and then third week of April we were down to 19 degrees. I didn't have to worry about an excess harvest of pawpaws. I had a few because there were still a few late blooms out there. But yes, just like with any fruit, if you get a hard frost when they're in bloom, it does them in. It does them in. I mean, they can tolerate quite a bit, but and they typically don't bloom until late anyway. Once again, being native. But if we have a period of warm weather, like we do occasionally, extended period of warm weather, and everything's in bloom. You know, there were no apples up here that year. There were no peaches. There were lots of replanted gardens. Then, yeah, the pawpaw, it got hit as well. But it takes the wet weather fine. I mean, we can have a wet spring. Nah, those flies find the blooms just fine.
From any of those experiences, other crops, we tend to thin the fruit load. Did you see any differences in like the pawpaw size or quality, like on those years when you had the frost kind of take out some of the flowers? Do they compensate, like say peaches will, with the thinning aspect, or is it being they're more native and that they really just they can balance their own fruit load and don't have like overbearing where you get a whole bunch of really tiny pawpaws versus larger size? Is that a thing at all with them, or do they pretty well self-regulate?
Well, actually, we have this minor pest of pawpaws that attacks the flower on pawpaws, and typically and I found the same thing myself. It does a nice job of thinning the fruit, and so you don't have to go out and do it. And occasionally this pest can be a real problem, but for the most part, it isn't a problem. I think it's only been a problem in a few large pawpaw orchards. I think Kentucky State, since they have one of the larger pawpaw orchards in the country, they have noted it, I think, a couple of times in their 20 years. And even then they say, it's rather unusual. And they look at that pest as just having to save them time out in the field because they don't have to thin the crop. But yes, if it wasn't for that insect, thinning would be good, because just as you mentioned, Nathan, we would get more small fruit, which then is not what people want. We get more seed to pulp, and nobody likes that.
So when you have been evangelizing pawpaws, we'll call you a pawpaw evangelist at this point. What type of growers are you seeing that are pawpaw growers? I mean, especially as you talk about needing a growers group as a good direction, do you feel like the people are approaching it with that goal in mind, or are you finding you need to kind of encourage them more?
I'm trying to encourage them with the idea that it's a niche. That it's a niche. It's a niche fruit, and to approach it that way. I would not say buy 100 trees, put in a couple of acres, or put in a couple of acres of pawpaw trees, and the market will be the path to your door. No, it won't. Start small, and particularly if you're a fruit grower and you're already growing some fruit and you're selling to some restaurants and things like that, this could just be, one of those additional fruits that might attract a restaurant to you and say, oh, you sell peaches and raspberries and pawpaws? Oh, yeah, okay. Oh, that's pretty cool. And you can supply all they need of, the mainline fruits. But you have pawpaws, you could give me pawpaws, I could do a menu special, on pawpaws, and it'd be like, yeah, I could do that, kind of like people that raise buffalo. It's just kind of a niche thing that everyone kind of begins to recognize them. But if we can continue to build this, then hopefully, much like we've been able to do successfully with organic grains here across the Midwest, is we are beginning to then get our producer co-ops coming together that are milling the grains. We're getting distribution, and we are getting it to the point where our local consumer can actually buy that locally produced grain if they want to do that. And I think that's what it's going to take with Pawpaws, is it's going to start out as a niche, much like organic grain did. And then we work it in through the specialty for Pawpaws. It'll be restaurants, maybe bakeries, but it's going to be in that specialty line. And then from that, hopefully build a demand with the consumer saying, oh, I like this. I want more of this. I want more of this. Or a dairy, if you can supply enough that a local dairy can run a Pawpaw ice cream, for even if it's just a week, just to get it out there, even if it's in their retail stores, just to get it that way, then there a little demand and people go, oh, wow, where'd you get this? Just that type of thing is kind of what it's going to take. People are not going to beat your path to the door, because how many of you are there that haven't had it before on this call?
It's someone who's okay with not having it.
So. Yeah, and you've had it and you don't want it. And so, which is why when I planted my trees back in the late 2000s, I tried to pick the varieties that Kentucky State, which was really the only source of information at that time, and still really is, the varieties that they suggested as being the best for flavor. And so those are the ones that I have. And today, the Susquehanna, the Shenandoah, a lot of them are named for rivers on the East Coast, but once again, Appalachia, the Piedmont region, this is where a lot of the variety native selections came from. These are some of our better ones that are coming out. Kentucky State, they've got a couple of nice ones that they've just released that are doing well and have that lower ratio. And so we're getting there. I mean, we're getting there. It's a process. It's a process. And when you add to the fact that Kentucky State and then the let's see, what's his name? Neil Peterson, the Neil Peterson group are the only ones that are really working on this. And Neil Peterson, statistician with the USDA, he did it. He did it as a hobby. He did it as a hobby, boyhood hobby. He apparently growing up in the Piedmont region, his grandparents near their farm, I guess they had a tasty pawpaw grant. And so yeah, he apparently then went out and decided and found that not all pawpaws were tasty. And so he spent his weekends going through the mountains, selecting pawpaws that he thought tasted good. And then from that, he would take fruit home, save the seed, grow out the trees, and then from there, he and Kentucky State, they trade back and forth on this are working on the breeding and cultivar selection. And Kentucky State, even though they've been pretty quiet lately, they're still releasing cultivars. And so is the Peterson group up in Pennsylvania. So, and they're all licensed out. So yeah, we're coming along. I mean, it's just a new industry. It takes time, like anything else. And particularly when there's no big dollars being thrown at it. I mean, this is just, a small land grant university and an individual nursery. They're doing most of the work, sometimes in cooperation with each other. But, that's really who's doing all the work in Pawpaws right now.
Doug, has anybody done any work on the nutritional analysis? We know like a blueberry is a superfood. Is there anything that stands out with Pawpaw that might help with that niche marketing?
Yes. Now, yes, I happen to have that information. I'm pulling it up now. Yes, actually, Kentucky State took a look at that, and they pulled it all up. And so from their information, they have found out that Pawpaws have for the most part, Pawpaw has 3 times as much vitamin C as an apple. It has 6 times as much riboflavin as an apple. Niacin content is high as well as in an apple, in most of our fruits. It's high in potassium, like a banana. So, I mean, yes, they have a lot of good things going for them. Amino acid has all the essential amino acids. So it has a lot going for it. It has a nice fat profile, better than a banana. 40% is mono unsaturated, 28% is polyunsaturated. So, which a banana is only 15 and 34. So it has a much better fat profile than some of our other tropical fruit. So yeah, it has quite a bit going for it. But so yeah, and that's part of the reason why some people are seeking it out, is for that reason. So yeah, but once again, it's awfully hard to get it into our regional food system with limited processing or no processing capability. And so once again, I think we're just going to have to kind of work to develop a following, and then from that it will come. And the fact that most of its following is in rural areas, that isn't exactly where the population centers are. And so, it really is getting it in the restaurants in Chicago and Indianapolis and St. Louis, and down in Kentucky, they're working it into their markets in Louisville and trying to get it into Nashville, down in Tennessee. That idea of trying to build that demand so the local consumer is saying, I want more Pawpaw. And then there'll be somebody that can go into a bank and say, hey, there's this demand. Here's my collateral. I want to just do this, and comes up with a good business plan that can start some processing.
I think, your thoughts on some of the processing. I think there's all kinds of course, processing opportunities. Bronwyn and I have a chance to see a local grower that's kind of taken on some processing of on a sweet corn side of things, but I think there's all kinds of our vegetable. If we had some even kind of generic processors for things like like flash freezing or something, I know that may not apply for Pawpaw, but just, some kind of multi-purpose processing facilities, because obviously, you have to have an inspected facility and, all the, specifics to do that. But, an average farm isn't necessarily going to maybe be able to invest in that. But no, I think you just highlight another opportunity for those, that where that niche would fit and could allow more opportunities for a locally produced product to be, you know, upscaled in our food system.
Right, right. And so often, unfortunately, we have to upscale it before it becomes available to the masses.
Yeah, it's kind of a chicken and egg situation in a way, as far as, you know, that's what you need. You know, there might be demand for it, but you have to balance that to make it work. And obviously we all show of different foods that have had successful launches, and for everyone there has been, there's probably some that have not too. So
Right, right. And so, yeah, that's, and so, yeah, I mean, I keep coming back to organic grains because here in Central Illinois, that's all we do is raise grain. But that has been kind of our success story for the organic producer. Is we got it because we upscaled it into Chicago markets. The demand grew there enough that a few local producers and a couple banded together, and they were able to get loans to put in processing plants to where they could process not only their organic wheat or grains, but they could also buy other people's organic grain to be made into different flours and products for the bakery industry, particularly going towards the big Chicago area. But now at least we can buy it mail order here downstate, and it is carried in a few markets. So I mean, I keep going back to that, but for me, that's kind of an example of how it kind of has to go. It got upscaled, something as simple as wheat and oats and barley, but it had to go to Chicago before it could come back to Central Illinois.
And it's you're a perfect location for this to launch. I mean, thinking about Chicago or St. Louis or Indianapolis to have, yeah.
Well, but I look at Illinois, Southern Illinois, it has, depending where you are in Southern Illinois, you have the Indianapolis, St. Louis, you've got Louisville. Memphis is not that far away either. And the interstate system that we're blessed with in this state, we depending where you are in the state, you're within 2 to 3 hours of a major metropolitan area, and typically multiple, even in Northern Illinois, up in where you are, Grant. I mean, there's Chicago, there's Madison, there's Milwaukee. So, I mean, we are blessed, but we also have to be marketers as well whenever we do this. We all love to produce, but if we're going to be in raising specialty types of crops, pawpaws, whatever, we're going to have to be able to go out and sell that product. And it is worth selling. I like pawpaws.
I know where I'm going to be next September. I'm going to be arranging a professional development trip to Central Illinois, right?
Well, I tell you what, for our fall thing, I will try and make some ice cream. My wife will dearly love it. Dearly, I'll have to make 2 batches.
Well, I'm not going to let Grant's experience ruin it for me. I would be very interested to take an open opinion and perspective on trying it fresh or in
childhood experience. So we should say as a young child.
I will tell you now, I will bring it to our fall gathering, ice cream. Because it's the appropriate time for it, that time of the year, in September. And everyone can have a sample. And I hope you like it, but if you don't, well, I've learned something as well. Or I know I have other people I need to work on. No, I hope you'll like it. I haven't met anyone who didn't like it yet. So, but we'll find out. And yeah, I'll do that. I make that promise. In fact, I'm going to put it on my calendar so I don't forget that I made that promise.
There you go.
You've got me
I'm gonna look
willing.
forward to that. Yep.
Yeah, I'm willing to try it now, but I will warn you, I hate mangoes, so I don't know how this is gonna go.
You like
Well,
bananas, Katie?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you like pineapple?
okay.
Have you had fresh pineapple?
Yes,
Okay. You like fresh ripe pineapple?
yes.
Okay. All
Okay,
right.
so might be there, yeah.
Okay. Okay. And a lot of times with us here in Central Illinois, our mangoes that we get in the supermarket, they're only worthy of making into something else. Yeah, it's like a winter tomato. You buy it for the color. I mean, the mangoes we get here, I mean, they don't taste anything like when you go down to where they're produced and they're ripe. I was amazed. I never liked papayas until I actually had one ripe near where it was produced, and it was like, oh my gosh, these things are wonderful. Because all I ever had up here were these things that came in green. I let it sit on the counter for a couple of weeks. It turned colors, and I ate it, and it was like, what's the big deal?
There's a lot of things like that. Yeah, when you get an opportunity to taste, the real fresh, almost off the farm kind of ripe product, can be way different. It's great to have all those things, at our disposal of all the supermarkets and things, but it's yeah, there is a quality factor, especially for some of these out of season or long distance, transported crops, tropical fruit where we're not in a tropical climate. That there's some compromise there.
Yes, there is. I mean, I think we've all done taste testings with local people. I know back when we used to have a big celebration here in Decatur, I went down and I had fresh strawberries and I had store-bought strawberries, and I did a sampling. If the people were unblindfolded and they saw the big red strawberries from the market, they said, oh, these are better. When I blindfolded them and they had to do it on taste only, they always selected the smaller, locally produced, sweeter fruit. But we're so ingrained with big and big and red being, oh, that's the best. And you take that away from them, and all of a sudden it's like, no, that's the one. And it was like, oh, well, I was going to say that, and it was like, yeah, because you're not tasting it, you're just going on what you see. And so yeah, I would agree. And our Illinois peaches, oh my gosh, they are so good. I drive to buy an Illinois peach. They're just so, yeah. I mean, I agree, and that's the same way with a ripe pawpaw from our good tasting varieties. It's a mild, very subtle flavor, but also just very complex as well. Very complex, and with the consistency, kind of like a banana. So I like them. It's been a process for me. Having never had a pawpaw before in my life until I put in the trees. It's been a process, but I have to say I've enjoyed it, and it has been a great low maintenance type of fruit tree. They truly are. I would say one of North America's best kept secrets is the pawpaw.
Well, Doug, we've put you through the ringer, answering a lot of questions today. Is there any kind of additional words of wisdom you'd like to leave with us?
If you're going to get pawpaws, for anyone contemplating buying pawpaws, I really would suggest going out and buying our newer varieties of pawpaws. And Kentucky State University has a website that has some of those on it. Some of our ones that have had really good reviews. Let's see if I can find that quickly. Here lately in particular are the Shenandoah type of variety. The Susquehanna has also gotten good reviews. So Potomac is, it makes for, it has a huge fruit. It also has great flavor and smaller seeds. So those are a couple out of the Peterson group. And then from Kentucky State, their newest addition, let's see if I can find that quickly. Their newest addition is a variety, maybe I can't find it quickly, but it's, wait just a minute.
Find it.
Yep, I'll find it. Yes, and so it is Kentucky State Pawpaw. Here we go. There.
It's almost
Yes, okay. It is Benson, KSU Benson. That is their latest one, and it is also probably their best one that they've come out with is KSU Benson. It has the lowest seed to flesh ratio of any of their releases so far. It's on par with the Peterson group releases that I talked about, the Susquehanna, Shenandoah, Potomac. So those are four of the best ones. We have some older ones, and if you want to know the older ones, Kentucky State University, their website has all those there as well to take a look at, and those are not bad. I have those. We have some great older varieties, but only by grafted to make sure that you're getting a consistent quality.
Great. And we'll make sure to put this in the under the information as well for today's video, so folks can find the Kentucky State University resources. So, well, thank you, Doug, for being with us today, and thanks to Bronwyn, Katie, and Nathan for being here today as well. You will find Doug's presentation on the Illinois Extension Local Foods and Small Farms YouTube channel, or by visiting go.illinois.edu/SFWW2022 YouTube. Thanks for joining us again today, and have a good day.